Welcome. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob MacDonald. Welcome to our Salesforce CPQ is end of sale trade up to Conga CPQ presentation. Today we're going to talk about just that. What does the Salesforce CPQ end of sale mean to you? What can you do, or what should you be looking to do as a result of that? And then obviously give you some options in terms of what Conga has to offer, because we should be an option for you based on what's coming. So let's jump in. We can talk about who's presenting. Let's make sure I got my cursor moving. There we go. So you already know me. I'm Rob MacDonald. I work in the product marketing group here at Conga. And I've got Ruskin and Derrick alongside me. They're the two experts. I'm just here. I'm just directing the slides. But why don't we go through? We'll get Ruskin and Derrick to introduce themselves. Ruskin, since you're first on the left here, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Rob. So, hey, everybody, Ruskin Kerslake. So I head up Global Strategic Services here at Conga. So I've kind of worked on a lot of different sides of the businesses, but predominantly for the last 20 years, I've worked in technology on the implementation side of organizations, working for major software organizations, and particular focus around what we used to call quote to cash. So that whole life cycle from quotations through to contracting, through to order management and billing. Spent a lot of my time here previously at Aptus and now at Conga. My focus is helping customers successfully implement those whole programs. So not just about the technology, but understanding the processes, understanding how to really kind of build out the strategy from a business perspective, and then utilizing the technology as the enabler for that strategy. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. Good to have you, man. Derrick.
Yep. So Derrick Burks, Director of Business Transformation. So I've been in the pricing and the CPQ space for about 20 years as well. And really what I focus on here is working with our customers, large customers, small customers, but basically trying to understand, what are their business objectives? What are their business requirements? How can CPQ help them, right? And then ultimately we work with you to try to quantify the benefit of achieving those goals. So, like I said, I've been working in this space for about 20 years and look forward to having the discussions today.
Awesome. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? For those of you that are joining, this is not really going to be like a sales pitch. We are going to talk about ourselves and Conga and all the great things that we do, but really the focus today is to talk about why are we here? What's going on? What's taking place in the market that we're having this conversation? And then we're going to spend a lot of time around planning and execution, because at the end of the day, there are some things that you're going to need to do based on what's happening, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that and highlight the points that we believe for you to be successful in the next phase of your CPQ journey, what you need to do to be successful. And then obviously we're going to give you options, which would be obviously maybe making a move and looking at somebody like Conga to be your next CPQ. So let's jump in and talk about why are we here? Well, Salesforce CPQ, or what's also known as Steelbrick, it's aging out. So that they've announced that there's an end of sale, and that means no more net new customers. Now the options are you can stay there. Salesforce said that if you want to stay, you can do that. You can migrate to their new, you migrate to Revenue Cloud, or as they've just announced during Dreamforce last week. Was that last week, Dreamforce? Or was it the week after?
2 weeks ago.
That long ago. Agentforce Revenue Management, or it's now called ARM. Or you can move to something else. The reason why those are your three options is because of the end of sale, and if you move to either RCA or ARM, it's a rebuild. It's not a migration. You have to start essentially from scratch. So that then opens the door to look at maybe what are your other alternatives, what are your other options. And that's really why we're here today, because there are some things that you need to do regardless of whether or not you move to RCA or ARM or Conga, that you need to pay attention to make sure that you're successful in that move. Because again, it is a complete redo. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. That's what we're going to talk a lot about today. So Derrick, I'm going to lead you into this one. There are lots of solutions out there, right? So there's Salesforce, there's us, there's all kinds of other companies that do this stuff. But what are some of the issues that you see kind of customers dealing with across the board when they're looking at these types of technologies and either adopting them or growing them over time or whatever that may be?
Yeah, well, I think the first one there is product configurations, right? And so over time, what we're seeing is a lot more complexity in product offerings. A lot of companies are trying to move to recurring revenue type models. So whereas before they sold a product, now they want to sell a product with some sort of maybe service or other recurring revenue attribute to it. So that just increases, what you're doing in terms of configuring and building out the products and the SKUs that you have to manage and that sort of thing. The other area there is performance. So when we start looking at selling to multiple locations, maybe different pricing by location, variations in the product, et cetera, you can quickly get to, some of our customers can quickly get to 1,000 line item carts. And that oftentimes impacts performance if you're not on a highly performant platform. So that's the kind of issues that we see that are impacting CPQ today in terms of configurations. The other thing is there's so many new business models. Like I just said, having combinations of products and services and whatnot, there's different charge types for that. And a lot of times if, a more basic CPQ solution, each charge type is a line item. So if you have 2 or 3 charge types for something, all of a sudden you can see the explosion of line items in your quotes and that sort of thing. So that's an issue. Some people try to overcome that with manual processes, but that starts to lead to a lot of inefficiency and slowness in response and that type of thing. So I think, the new business models are really posing some challenges for some of the legacy CPQ solutions. And then the next one is around omnichannel delivery. A lot of companies today have, they're selling via multiple channels, but a lot of times their external channel, that website that people can go and buy on, is a different system entirely than the system that their salespeople are using. So it's hard to keep those in sync. And you may want to offer, solutions where, you get a better deal if you go self-service, right? And so again, it's a hard thing to do. A lot of people, it's a high cost of ownership. So a lot of people are starting to look for how do I have one solution that'll serve all of my channels and have consistency across those channels.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, you need to find a tool that enables you to address, a lot of these things, right? Which, when you look at the current kind of Salesforce CPQ, we know based on the customers that we've been speaking with, that's not necessarily something that they can address. So if organizations fail to adopt to those kinds of things, you were telling me the other day, there's some consequences to that, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of the usual list of suspects, right? Yeah. So if you're not addressing your customer needs, you're probably going to see a decline in market share, right? And that in and of itself is going to typically lead to a decline in revenue. And if you're not able to deliver, what the market is expecting, that's going to impact your reputation of your organization. You're not going to be seen as a tier 1 type company. It can be a little bit of a laggard in the marketplace. And if you're trying to overcome all that with just, hey, let's just do some manual things and we'll make it work. We don't have the tools to do it, but we got enough people, we can make it work. That's operational inefficiencies. That's not sustainable long term. And with all of these things, if you're not getting these right, you're going to miss the growth opportunities as well. Because like we just said, a lot of companies are moving from more traditional selling models to newer models. And if you're not able to keep up with that, then you're going to miss those growth opportunities.
Yeah,
that last one, I was just going to add to that, guys. The last one, the missed growth opportunities, just something just came to mind. I was with a customer. They're a long-standing customer now. So I think we probably started this conversation around about 2016. And what they make is highly complex, and it's an engineering company that make highly complex weather machines. And one of the key challenges that this organization had was about they wanted to grow in different regions. The challenge they had was that their salespeople technically had to be very, very technical engineers. And that meant that they were very limited by the regional growth that they could have because they couldn't hire those people in the regions that they wanted to go in, particularly new geographies. So one of the things that they were looking at was how could they utilize Conga CPQ to expand into those regions by self-service, by allowing the customers or the prospects to be able to go on and order that particular components or particular solutions that they wanted, but having that kind of the structure being guarded by the rigor of the CPQ solution, right? So the inclusion and exclusion rules. So they didn't need to be an expert of how to make these. They didn't need to have expert salespeople into those regions, but they could now start selling into those regions because they had the guardrails around CPQ, and that enabled them to actually start to grow and actually build the business out into new regions. And then the people followed that slowly. So I think it's an interesting thing around growth. For sometimes we think it's just about the number, but actually it can be around enablement, and it can be around how you support those customers in those regions.
Yeah, that's a great point. Really good point. Okay, so when you hear others talk about this kind of stuff, right? Like everybody that's on the call today, I mean, I'm sure they've got people knocking down the door saying, "Hey, you got to get off Steelbrick. Like it's the end of the world. Like what are you doing? Like you need to do it. It's and that may or may not be the case depending upon the organization, but we don't want to cast a gloom and doom kind of over this, like the end of the world is here and like you got to make a change tomorrow, because that may or may not be the case depending upon the organization. But there is an opportunity right now that if you look at it through that lens, you can now kind of determine, well, I can evaluate what I'm doing now and really determine whether or not what I have or what I'm doing actually meets my business need. Does it meet the strategy of where I'm going? Like Ruskin, you just kind of just touched on that with that one customer, right? They had an opportunity and they had to reevaluate what they were doing to make sure that whatever they bring in or whatever they're using can fit that business need. So talk a little bit about what this means to organizations with an ability to kind of evaluate their plans. And I'll open it up to two of you. If Derrick, maybe you might want to start with that.
Sure. So I think, going back to that earlier slide, the choice A, B, and C, that first choice of stick with Steelbrick, that's kind of deciding not to decide. But at some point, you're going to have to decide. Are you going to move to the new Salesforce product, or are you going to move to something else? Because it is a move. It's not just a simple, just click the red button and everything will convert over. So I think you need to look at some of the things that are going on in the world today, and what are your needs, and is it worth moving sooner instead of later? And I think one of the things that's going to be very important today is around margin protection. So with all of the things around supply chain disruptions, tariffs, all of that sort of thing, it's important to understand what your costs are when you make a pricing decision, because you need to understand what your margin's going to look like. Because as when you have tariffs ranging from 10 to 20 or 30% from one day to the next, that's a huge hit to your margin if you're not taking that into account. So not saying we need to manage cost plus or anything like that, but you need to be cognizant of what your margin is when you're making a pricing decision, and having a solution that you can get visibility to that when you're making agreeing to a price with a customer. That's an opportunity right now, right? That's a big opportunity. Markets are not as stable as they used to be in terms of supply chains and whatnot. So I think there's a real opportunity here to do better margin management by having a more advanced tool that can give you that kind of information as you're making a pricing decision. Like we also mentioned, the new business models. We see that expanding as well. And so that's an opportunity to grow your business, right? To be able to add a service or whatever that may be. But it's something that is difficult to incorporate into some of the legacy CPQ solutions or manual solutions. So there's a real opportunity there to look at these new business models and how can I grow my business by adding a service offering, adding some kind of recurring subscription service, or maybe just entirely changing my model. Instead of selling my product, sell the solution that product delivers as a subscription, right? So having tools that can handle that. We have customers, for instance, in the radiology space, and there the question is, do I want to buy the machine, or do I want to have the machine for like 3 years and commit to purchasing a certain amount of consumables that go with the machine? So very different business models that need to be accommodated. And then the omni-channel delivery, that's a big opportunity. I mean, we all are buying more and more online, right? And if you're going to go buy a car today, who just walks into the dealership without having already done their research online? Most people have already figured out what model or two models they want to look at, and they go in very well informed, and they're very comfortable buying online. I think we're seeing that more and more in B2B space, and having a solution that can accommodate both that direct sale via online as well as a direct sale via a conversation with a salesperson or via an intermediary, be that a partner, a reseller, or a distributor. It's going to be critical to have a solution that can make sure you're managing the pricing consistently and efficiently across all of those different channels. So to me, these are all opportunities. We see them as pains today, but solving that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Just before we go a little bit further, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, we're going to take questions and stuff at the end. So for those of you that are online, you'll notice that there's a window to the right of where you see the slides, and you'll see that there's a QA section there. So if you want to drop your questions in there, we can take those at the end. Anyway, all right. So we kind of laid the groundwork here, and we talked about kind of what's going on, why are we here? Why are we talking about this stuff? But what we wanted to really get into is take some time to talk about, what does the evaluation to execution looks like? And Ruskin, when we first started talking about doing these slides, you had said, if somebody comes in and tells a customer that this is going to be easy, you should just ask them to leave, because this is not going to be an easy change. There are going to be some hurdles. There is going to be some pain. So, I mean, listen, you've been doing this for a while now, and you've got a lot of expertise in really working with customers to figure out what that looks like. If somebody did tell you that this move was going to be easy, what would be the first thing you would say to them?
I would say that I'd be somewhat skeptical about that. I mean, it's as hard as you want to make it, right? And I think that's where the experience comes in of working with partners and with people that have done this before.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of this is around, a lot of the mistakes that we see are around expecting that technology to be the silver bullet, right? Again, I mentioned it previously, that's the enabler.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is a lot of the times, organizations forget about the human part of this as well, that you've really got to get that buy-in. And also starting to understand about what does good look like for us as an organization, and then how does that filter down to the individuals within that organization. Right. But don't be scared, right? I mean, this is completely doable. I mean, had the a genuine privilege of sitting with a customer and doing Q&A recently at our customer event in Paris a couple of weeks ago with BSC, where we started a conversation which was over dinner in May last year. Around just CPQ, just kind of like just talking about what CPQ is, because they had a CPQ evaluation going on, and from May last year, we went live with their CPQ system on Conga June this year. So it's absolutely doable. But the key part there was it was a true partnership, and there were some compromises on each side, but we went into it with our eyes open, and those compromises, I think, were something that we both needed to be aware of. And I'm kind of going to talk about that a little bit more. But I mean, it doesn't compromise the integrity. It doesn't compromise what you're trying to achieve. But you have to be realistic about what you can do within the set period of time, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to open this up to the two of you. What we kind of have them laid out here, obviously, but what are these three things that we have on the screen here? Why is it that we need to consider these when moving from one CPQ platform to another? What is it that why did you guys call these three things out in particular?
Sure. So for me, one is critical. There's clarity of scope. There's a lot of temptation, I think, and I think particularly in this scenario, because I've worked with customers coming from existing CPQ solutions moving to Conga, and there's that kind of temptation that what you can start to think about is what you do now is what you need to do in the future. So you're kind of tempted to do this lift and shift, So take the scope of what you're currently doing and then just replicate that onto a new platform. I would always, in a very positive, friendly way, may I add, challenge that, okay? Because actually this is your opportunity to start learning from perhaps some of the things that didn't go as well as you would wanted them to within the previous implementation. And also start to think about how you break this down into manageable kind of phases, but really start to think about what's the business impact. And when I mean challenge, it's the question is why, right? Well, why do we want to do that? You know, what part of the strategy is that supporting? What impact does that have on the business? And I kind of always say to people, you know, if you're trying to work out if a particular piece of function or a particular configuration that you're doing or a particular feature that you're absolutely someone is ardent about implementing, just ask yourself a question, right? Is this going to help me make money, save money, or stay out of trouble, right? And if it's not going to do one of those three things, then I would question whether it should actually be in scope. Now, it could well do all three of those things. It could do one of those things. But then what you want to understand is what impact does that actually have on the business? So having that clarity of scope and the impact that it has, both positive and negative on the business, is going to help you refine that scope. And that's going to give you that predictability of being able to deliver within a shorter time frame. That's going to reduce your risk for sure. Now, that actually kind of, I think, then loops into the third point here, which is change management, because you're going to have to manage the expectations of the users here, which is, okay, you know what? If you just take a shopping list of requirements, and this is a common thing I see as well, which is we just want all of this stuff, guys. Conga's a really, really robust platform. We can build all that stuff for you. But again, if you're not challenging that, well, why do you need that? Then you're going to have all of this stuff configured, which and then sometimes customized as well, right? Which actually is probably not the greatest thing because you could potentially be creating quite a lot of technical debt. So where that kind of conciliatory is probably a better word than compromise, where that comes into play is if we can simplify the process slightly here for this particular use case, and we can do this using out of the box functionality, would you buy into that? Would that support what you want to do rather than going into heavy customization for this particular use case? Because that means you can get this faster. That means that you've got a greater capability of being able to adapt this. You know, as you go along, you're going to want to make tweaks to these things because it's a living thing, right? It's intuitive, but you're going to want to keep going through it, and it's ongoing. So I think that change management, getting people involved from the get-go, making them feel that they are a part of this, making sure that the stakeholders really believe and see the vision and how that aligns up with strategy is really critical. And then the second part is more technical, which is as you start unhooking these systems, particularly CPQ, you're going to find there's a huge amount of dependencies sitting there with maybe your ERP system, because pricing updates are drawn from that ERP system. You start unhooking that, right? You need to know that hook needs to be replaced because that's where your real time is, or your stock checks, or all those kind of things that are happening, or your contracting terms, all those kind of good things. A myriad of those could actually, all that information be coming from multiple different systems. So you've got to understand those dependencies before you just move over to a new system.
And I guess I would add an example on the change management, you know, talking about getting buy-in and whatnot. So I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I call it the, you know, who's your Mikey? And there used to be a TV commercial for Life cereal where they had these two brothers sitting there and their mom had just given them this new bowl of Life cereal and told them it was healthy or something. And they were like, I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to eat it. And they had the younger brother, Mikey, sitting there. And the two brothers say, hey, let's get Mikey. He doesn't like anything. And they slide it over to Mikey and he looks at it and he takes a bite and wow, he just starts scooping it down. And they're like, hey, he likes it. And the reason I bring that up is, you know, oftentimes when you're doing these projects, you have a team that's all the people that are already bought in and they're on board and they're moving ahead. What you also need to do is bring some people in maybe that are not so convinced that this is what you should be doing or that it's not going to meet our needs, that type of thing. Get their input because they're the detractors, right? And if you engage them and they like what they see and they start saying, hey, this is a good thing, this is going to do good for our organization, a lot of people will fall in. So I call it, you know, find your Mikey, get them engaged in the project, take their input, use their input, and then when people see that they're on board with it, a lot of other people will follow along.
So true. I remember doing a project in a legal company, and which first day we went in to do the workshops for the scope, and we walked into the room. This was a really top five global legal company, and there were a lot of young fee earners sitting in there, and again, dating myself, sitting there with their Blackberries, and the project sponsor was so happy. He's like, "See, look what I've got you. Right, these guys are going to be amazing for you." And I had to take the sponsor outside and say to him, this is going to be a problem. And he's like, what? These guys are just like almost fresh out of university. They love technology. I was like, that's going to be the problem. I need the guys in the braces that still got the Rolodexes. I need them to come in this room, right? Because I also, they're your highest fee earners, right? It's like, they are. So I need them to come in the room because they're the ones that are going to lead this. They're the ones we need to get the buy-in, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be harder to manage in terms of a change. And if people see them using this stuff, then everyone else will follow. If they see these guys, it's just going to be another, well, they wouldn't they?
Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, I've seen a lot of instances where, the best technologies, the best laid plans have been completely, blown up because they didn't get buy-in from users, and it completely failed. So that's a big step. All right, Ruskin, this is a good slide.
Diagram. Yeah, it's a busy one, right?
Here. Yeah. Do you want to quickly talk about this one and we'll narrow it down, or?
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of like, I'm sure most people on the session today have seen this. Look, this is an implementation methodology. We're talking about steps and stages around the implementation of any CPQ solution, really. I mean, they're going to be variants of it, but primarily this is kind of what you're going to be doing. But yeah, Rob, let's focus on steps 1 to 3, because I think that's going to be the important part. And I call this evaluation to execution. Steps 4 to 9 are execution. Steps 1 to 3 are where you guys, if you're using Steelbrick or Salesforce CPQ right now, that's where you're going to be, right? It's where are you today, and how are you going to decide what change you're going to make? If you are going to make a change, how are you going to make that change, and how are you going to make that change successful? So we kind of touched on some of this, but I again, step 1 is really, really important, right? About assessing the current CPQ implementation, because I was going to say if I was a betting man, I am. So I would put good money on every time I go into an existing CPQ implementation, irrespective of the platform. I'm going to find a number of common denominators, and I'm going to find product pricing bloat. Okay, so I'm going to see just this amount of unused product catalogs, bundles, proliferation of products, a proliferation of price books, all that kind of stuff, right? That is just such a common thing to see. And you probably don't want to be bringing that stuff over into a new system. So again, this is back to this opportunity of being able to look at this and being able to rationalize this. And one of the things that we do as an organization, one of the things that my team does, when we work with the professional services or working with partners, is we kind of take the time to assess your current org, your Salesforce org, and really understand a little bit about those technicalities. So can we actually rationalize some of those products and pricing? And really what we're doing there is we're looking to see, well, when were they last used? When did you last sell this? When did you last sell this bundle? What was the value of this bundle? When was this price list last used? A lot of that will come because of some of the nuances of the systems that you're using, because of the way they're structured. You may not be able to do special discounts or promotions, so you're just going to have to create a new price list for a promotion. That proliferation happens. That's the stuff that then feeds into users actually getting a bad user experience because it's too hard to find a price because I've got all these different price lists, right? So assess that from a kind of, I guess that's a kind of commercial stroke technical aspect there. So really understand that in detail, and kind of just mark out the stuff that you don't need. We can help you with that and say, it's a really, really strong argument. If someone says, I need that price book, okay, but it hasn't been used since you implemented it 4 years ago. Why do you need that price book? If there's a good reason for it, absolutely, let's do it. But maybe share that reason that it hasn't been used for 4 years, that why it needs to be a new system. So I think that's absolutely kind of critical. And again, as I mentioned, that we can help you do that, kind of do that assessment. And then you're kind of looking at, you've got that kind of your as-is processes. And I'm really inclined to make sure that people don't make the mistake of just lifting and shifting and just taking that as is, because this, Derrick was talking about earlier on, this is your opportunity to look at this with a fresh set of eyes and start to think about, how can we do things better? right? Again, back to the, you know what, this process, is it helping us make money, save money, stay out of trouble, or any one of those three things, or all of those three things? If it's not, maybe we change it. And again, back to the shopping list example, you know, how can we make this simplified? How can we simplify this process? What value does this process actually have? So I think there's quite a lot of groundwork that you should be doing there to really assess what you've currently got and what you actually really need. But I also think it's about focusing on today, but thinking about tomorrow. And what I mean by that is another problem I see quite common going into people with existing solutions, CPQ solutions, is that what I call they've kind of painted themselves into a corner. You know, that metaphor, like, you know, they've painted the floor of the room and now they're stuck in the corner and they can't get out without walking on all over the paint. And that's because they've thought about what they want to do today and they've focused on that and they've built the solution. And a lot of times this does come with customization. So when I say customization, I mean people coding rather than drag and drop configuration, where they've customized the system quite heavily. And now they want to add omnicommerce, omnichannel. They want to add digital commerce, all that kind of good stuff. But they're prohibited from doing so because of the way they've customized the system for the first set of use cases. You know, that's going to slow you down. It's going to be expensive because you created a lot of technical debt. So think about today, but keep an eye on tomorrow as you start to assess these solutions as well. And then I think data migration, again, is obviously is critical. And that will come back down to understanding, again, around that proliferation and that rationalization of some of the core components that you'll have within a CPQ system, such as your product catalog, the proliferation of products, pricing books. You know, you also want to look at process rationalization as well, right? So look at kind of things like, you know, the type of quote types that you've got, the opportunity types, because I bet that's going to be quite probably proliferated over time, and also approval processes. You know, which approval processes are being used? What's the turnaround time for those approval processes? How effective are they? Essentially, and start to understand that, because you're probably going to want to change some of those as well. And then finally, what we mentioned was this is a team game, so making sure that we've engaged with all those stakeholders. But I think for the audience that we're kind of having this conversation with today, number one is the real pertinent part here, right? This is your opportunity to really, you know, actually take advantage of what solutions like Conga CPQ provide and start really kind of like being able to effectively support that business strategy and start getting things into a place for the long term.
Cool.
Yeah, every now and then we'll have a customer, you know, in the first meeting, basically they tell us, we want it to do everything just the way our current system does. You know, and my response is, then why are you talking to us, right?
Yeah.
Just don't spend any money, just keep doing what you're doing. But I think people need to see this not as, oh my gosh, we have to change now, but make it an opportunity, because the way you designed for your business 5 years ago is not necessarily how you need to design for your business today or 5 years from now. That's right. And so this is a real opportunity to not just change technology, but to make better business processes as well.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, you got to be honest with yourself, right? Like, look at it honestly and figure out, do I really need to do this anymore, right? That makes sense. Okay, so, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would really invest the time there, right? You know, I know that, you know, it's going to depend on when your renewal date is, you know, if you're coming off a sunset system. But if you have the time, take the time, slow it down, right? It's not necessarily going to take the pressure out of it, but start to do this in a very focused way and really focus on everything that we discussed about that first point there. Really do that assessment in detail, which brings us. I was
going to say, just at the end of the day, that foundation that you lay in doing those, like really spending time doing those steps, means that you will likely have less hurdles, less roadblocks, less failures as you go through and start your deployment later on down the road, right?
Yeah. So this is interesting. So this actually came from a real life project that I was working on. The slides that we're going to show you now, and it was we were having some challenges, I would say, around not taking a shopping list approach, where the business just came by and just went, right, here's a million things and we want them in the system. And, you know, there's a tendency to be able to say, yeah, absolutely, we can do all of that. You know, we're just going to do some really clever customization around this, and therefore we can be able to do that for you, etc. So that's great, right? As you probably picked up by now, I'm not a believer in that. If you can config over customization, do it. So I took these stakeholders through, and we had a very open, I wouldn't say arduous is necessarily the right word, but it certainly wasn't necessarily the easiest session where we went through and we started to score some of the items, and I broke them down and said, okay, look, what? Let's give these a score, right? If it's a 5, it's vital. It means you cannot live without this, and you have to do that. Now, by the way, you will have vitals. You surely will have vitals, right? So that's fine, and don't be afraid of those because those are going to be the part that have to be in the foundation. But what you're trying to do here is you're trying to winkle out the things that aren't that important, or the things that can wait into a further phase. So again, you're decreasing that implementation time frame, and therefore you're decreasing cost and you're decreasing risk. Two really important things if you want to try and sell this project in, to the senior stakeholders. So we laid out, and these are just some example priorities here. We laid those out. I mean, if you go to the next slide, we then just broke it in and just said, okay, we broke that down and said, okay, now let's break it down and look at your priorities. I want to break it down by effort. And what I'm trying to do here is just take the customer on a journey and just saying, look, if it's high impact and low effort, right, we should be prioritizing those and doing those and getting those into phase 1, because that, back to that change management, that cultural change. If these are things in here that are going to help people buy in because it's going to make their lives easier, and again, it's going to give them a better experience, it's going to get Mikey to enjoy the cereal, right, then get them into phase 1. Let's bring them in early, because you know what? The good news is we can do that because they're low effort. Your high impact, medium effort, maybe, again, that could be phase 1, that could be phase 2. Your low impact, and when I say impact here, I'm talking about business impacts. What is it, what's it going to do for the business? Back to my 3 things. Is it going to make money, save money, stay out of trouble? If it's not driving one of those things, I'm going to consider it to be low to medium impact, right? And if it's low impact and high effort, honestly, and if you can give me a really good reason, i.e. that it's vital, I'm really going to kick that into the long grass. That's probably going to be a phase 3 thing. And then if it's low impact and low effort, we tend to encourage our customers to take ownership of these items, because the majority of our customers will take ownership of the Conga solution. And they will, and rightly and absolutely, we encourage that because you want to lower the cost of ownership, right? So it's sort of like, yeah, you know what? These aren't vital. They're good. They certainly have good impact as well, but you don't need them from day one, and you don't need to be paying us or a partner to be delivering these. You should be doing this. And in fact, these are really good things to enable your admins on, to be able to deliver these kind of things. So let's kind of empower them to take this part of delivery. That becomes your backlog, part of your ongoing innovation. But for phase 1, we looked at a high impact with low to medium effort. We're going to put those into phase 1. And then phase 2 and 3 is going to be made up of high impact, medium effort stuff. And clearly that's going to change from project to project. But I guess the framework of what this did in terms of that particular customer, it really helped change their mindset of having to take this like humongous project with all these requirements, which would have taken 2 to 3 years to deliver. And honestly, probably when it was delivered, it would have satisfied people, and it would have been a load of changes, and the business would have changed. In those 2 to 3 years, that business would have changed remarkably. I mean, the specific customer I'm talking about, I know that it did. So what we would have delivered in 18 months would have been slightly irrelevant because the business had changed.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an incredible way to look at it, because like you said, when you look at what you need to do to make this change, it is going to be overwhelming, and being able to compartmentalize it essentially is what you've done to be able to, enable customers to, again, have that honest conversation to say, is this an actual high impact, or is it maybe not, right? It enables you to really set the stages for that success that we're looking at, that, obviously every organization wants to have when they go about making a change like this, right?
Absolutely. And again, do this in a positive way, and you keep people engaged in it. And it's interesting because this actually becomes quite a democratic process, and then you start seeing the buy-in come in from this, which whereas before, when you just got this big shopping list, it's not democratic at all. It's just like, no, I just want that done. Yeah. It is chaos, and then it will breed chaos as well. Yeah. Sorry, Derrick, please.
I was just saying, one thing we can do for customers on that front is we have a maturity survey, right? And so it looks at, about 18 different topics around CPQ or CLM, whatever the case may be. And we send that out to a broad population within the organization of folks that, have different levels of engagement in these processes, get their feedback in terms of where do we stand today in terms of our capability, and where do we want to be on each of those 18, and what's that priority to close that gap. And then when you come back with that, you kind of have this type of a chart, And so now there's some focus that, hey, the consensus of the group was that these are the things that we need to, the gaps we need to close. And this is kind of the initial priority. And so it can kind of influence this phasing as well. And it's like you said, it gets people engaged then, right? They had some input in the process, and it really gives them a benchmark of where they want to go. And I like to see people do it before they do an RFP, because we get an RFP and it has 300 things and everything's worth 1 point. If you do that kind of an exercise before an RFP, you can come back and say, as an evaluator, as a customer, and say, hey, here's some things that are worth 5 points. Here's some things that are worth 1 point, right? These are the ones we want to focus on. So some good tools out there to help people get this prioritization in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so this one kind of leads us into if you are going to make a change, right? Or even if you're going to stay where you are, there's also some evaluation that you need to do on maybe the different platforms that are available out there as well, right? The different solutions, as it were. Do you want to we have about 10 minutes left. So mm-hmm. we did only have 3 or 4 slides left, but why don't you dive into this quickly?
This came from the same customer, and being completely transparent, solution 1, solution 2, and solution 3 were actually different options for the same project. And what we did is we weighted it based on actually what do you need here? So the criteria down, and this was this was their criteria. We helped them get to this criteria, but it was their criteria that they agreed on. And then we went through and we weighted it and just said, look, let's I'll give you my opinion, which is what I did, which was the first version of this, and I gave it to them. And then you guys should go away and do this yourselves, right? And we're not going to influence this. We're going to be, in fact, I think from memory, it was the other way around. I held back and then I shared mine afterwards. They went through this first. And it was very interesting. And actually, we both came to the same conclusion of which solution was the right one for them. But effectively, what we were doing was just saying, look, what is the criteria you're going to make your decision based on here? And this could be bigger. I'd encourage people to try to not make it too prolific in terms of the criteria, but clearly, you're probably going to want more than 6 or 7. But then we're just scoring this and trying to be as objective as we can be. I've used this a lot with other customers, and to my disappointment, sometimes it's outscored the ones that I've wanted. I was like, man, I thought that was the one that we should be going for, but it doesn't stack. Like, the numbers are telling me this doesn't stack. So we've had a conversation and we've worked out the fact that actually, you know what, this is the right way of doing this for all the reasons that you guys have kind of shared. It's just a different way, just a different lens of putting that on that decision.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And again, it's one of those moments where you've got to have an honest conversation again, right? There may be a product that scores really high in some sort of review, or maybe it scores regardless, you got to get what's right for you, and not what somebody else, Tom down around the corner said, oh, I got this one. It's like, well, that one might not be what's right for your business, right? Yeah. You have to look at it through your own lens. Okay, so options. So we covered a lot of the things that that you should think about before making, or to support making, these changes, right? And like we mentioned earlier, those choices could be a non-choice, even though that is a choice, that you might stay where you are, or you might go to the new Revenue Cloud or ARM, or maybe you come to Conga. So let's talk just quickly about why should the customers, why should the people sitting on this call today maybe think about Conga as an option. And we've got about maybe 3 or 4 minutes to cover the slide, and do you guys want to kind of walk through that, or do you want the marketing speed?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I'll pick up number 1. Let's start there, because to me, this goes back to what I was saying at the top here, right? Which is, this talks to 2 things. It talks to about rapid implementation. Okay, so if you follow what we've just been talking about how you prioritize the requirements based on impact, then you can time box that implementation. You can reduce the risk, you can reduce the time frame, so you can get that rapid implementation. And then it's gradual dynamic customization, right? You don't have to do everything today. Just get the foundation in place and then be able to do it. But always do it with a lens of keeping an eye on tomorrow. Right? You don't want to paint yourself in a corner because this particular solution that you've chosen is fantastic for just being able to do what I need to do today, but I didn't think about tomorrow. And that's, I think, where Conga comes into its own, particularly with Conga on the platform. We're able to do both of those, and we're able to meet the best of both worlds there. So we give you that future-ready flexibility with that rapid implementation and gradual dynamic configuration.
Okay, yeah, and I'll take the next one. So speed and performance, as configurations and pricing and volumes of line items and carts and whatnot, are ever increasing. When you're on a platform that has governor limits and whatnot, it just slows down the performance, and the user experience is not as good. With our platform, our Conga CPQ, we're already doing 10,000 plus line items. We have goals and targets well beyond that we're already starting to achieve. So I think that's important to ensure that good user experience and being able to handle the complexities that we see coming, every day.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that then leads into the third one around omnichannel delivery. We've got a lot of customers that they have their own, for instance, their own e-commerce sites using completely different technology. And kind of through headless APIs, they're utilizing Conga CPQ as the backbone. So they're using the pricing and all the rules and all the engines behind that on Conga CPQ to deliver that omnichannel experience. So I think that, we give you that capability to be able to utilize that CPQ technology and in fact all the Conga technologies in whatever method and whatever delivery method that you want.
And I think the fact that our solution is CRM agnostic is really an advantage, because you're going to have folks, in your organization that don't necessarily need or have a requirement for a CRM license, and they should be able to access the solution and not necessarily have to pay that extra tax, right? And so with our solution, if you don't need to be in CRM, you can have just a Conga CPQ license, and that's all you need. I think the other important thing is that being CRM agnostic, you might be a Salesforce shop today, Salesforce CRM, that's fine. And, that works great with our CPQ, but maybe you acquire a company tomorrow that runs Microsoft Dynamics or one of the other CRM solutions. And you want to be able to, bring them into the organization as rapidly as possible to capture the synergies of that acquisition. And so with our solution, you could have, one of your teams is running on Salesforce CRM, the other teams in Microsoft Dynamics CRM, and they're using a common CPQ solution to do all of their pricing and quoting. So I think that's a big advantage for a lot of folks now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think 5 makes us pretty unique as a vendor, right? I know this is, we drink our own champagne. So that whole, what was quote to cash, now revenue life cycle, that whole beginning of that customer buyer experience. So from starting from CPQ, being able to put the quotation or the proposal together through to contracting, that's really key, right? You've got all the information that you're putting together for an accurate quotation or proposal. Surely you want to make sure that information, that accuracy is then reflected in the contract that you have, and having the fact that it's all sitting on platform access to all that and automatically taking that data, I think is a really, really key part. So again, that's helping you make money. It's certainly helping you stay out of trouble. And then being able to then distill that information and, whether it's using our billing tool, commonly what we see is a lot of this is kind of taken for order management. So we do a lot of integration into ERP systems because, hey, that's what they do, right? So it's kind of decomposing the BOM or decomposing some of the items around a proposal or around a contract, putting that out to billing, putting that out to manufacturing. So we've got that capability. So I guess that also helps you solve today's problems, but also if you're thinking about tomorrow, kind of be able to support what you want to do tomorrow as well.
Yeah, and that really leads me into our last slide here, where we do have the platform in which CPQ fits on or resides on is shared with our CLM and document automation tools as well. So when you look at the future, and we talked a lot about this today, it's not just about building for what you need today. It's what are you going to need tomorrow? And maybe that's an integration with contract lifecycle management capabilities, or generating documents automatically with e-signatures, right? So all of that stuff is available out of the platform, which really sets organizations up, for that kind of long-term vision as we see it here at Conga, in terms of how organizations should probably look at all of these technologies as a single package, because it really does support the business in ways that a lot of other organizations can't. Any other thing to add with that one, guys, or can we move on to start taking some questions?
Let's take some questions.
Yeah. All right. So I was going to jump into the last slide here. So kind of next steps. I mean, obviously the next steps, customers, people that are on the phone today are going to have to figure out, well, what do I need to do? Like, what should I do next? And the first thing is you're probably going to want to look at some sort of, migration strategy and have conversations around that. And listen, we would obviously love to come in and have that conversation with you. Those are our actual email addresses. So if you'd like to reach out to either myself or Derrick or Ruskin, I didn't ask for their permission to put their emails there, but I did it anyway. All kidding aside.
I was just going to add, Rob, that I'm happy to do this in person. If you're on the West Coast or somewhere warm, then absolutely I'll do it in person, right? East Coast or cold, going to be remote.
Yeah, that's for Derrick, because Derrick lives somewhere warm, so he has to go to cold. We have to share
exactly.
Yeah. The other thing, just before we jump into some of this stuff as well, is that there is a link to a kind of a landing page that describes a little bit more about who Conga is, and how we help support kind of this transition with the Salesforce CPQ transition. I believe that is in the Docs tab. If you look on your UI on the left-hand side, there should be a URL in there where you can click directly on that, and it will take you straight to that webpage. I did put the URL here. I know it sucks trying to type out URLs, but maybe you can screen grab it and you can go back and look at it later in case that URL is not there. But let's look at some questions. Let me see if I click this button. Does this work? Yeah. Well, this is, I guess, so some people have been following the news, and you guys can help me with this one as well, but I'll probably jump in on this. And I'm going to stop sharing screen, I think. So it's just us. With the acquisition of Pros, how do you envision Conga CPQ in Salesforce managed package? I'll take that one first. It shouldn't change. It'll be the same. We're still maintaining our managed package on Salesforce. You can still, that's the beauty of what we have here, right? We have CPQ on platform. If you want to install it directly into and run it on the Salesforce platform, you can do that. And although the intent is to acquire Pros, that hasn't been official yet. We won't know that until probably later on this year, or maybe early into the new year. But when we look at what that integration looks like and what those technologies look like, then there will likely be some proliferation of the two technologies into a singular unit. But we don't know that yet. Do you guys have anything in on that?
I think we're good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Migrating from Salesforce CPQ to Conga CPQ, is it automated or manual?
That's a great question. And it also depends on what elements you're talking about there. So, is there a button that you click and suddenly it takes everything that you've configured in Salesforce and then it magically appears in Conga? The answer to that is unfortunately not. But there are some things that you can automate that we can help with. One is around the analysis. So we work with partners and have partner tools to be able to do that analysis that I mentioned around the product proliferation, all that kind of good stuff. So that is actually running an app that gives you that output and that data to then help you make the kind of informed decisions about how you plan to do the migration. But the migration itself is a PS project, and I think this individual's from Cloud Sales, so you guys are fully experienced with doing both of this on the Salesforce platform and also the Conga platform. So data migration, you can automate that obviously, but if the intent of the question is there an automated way of being able to take Salesforce configurations and magically turn them into replicated on Conga, the answer is the majority of that would be no. You would still need to do some manual configuration there.
Yeah, and then of course the usual question, how long and how much? I'm summarizing what's written here, and we only got about 4 minutes left. But how long and how much do you guys anticipate something like this taking place? I
hate the answer to this question as much as I hate the question itself. It's not really an answer, right? But it depends, and this is the most frustrating answer to give people. But it really depends on the complexity of your current implementation. And again, that's why that whole step one is a really important one here, guys,
Yes.
because that will give you, that will illuminate whether you should be doing this and what's the right way of doing this.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be able to give you an idea of, first of all, if you were to lift and shift, what the likely expense of that would be. And I would absolutely advocate that you don't lift and shift. And if you take the approach not to lift and shift, that will enable you to reduce the scope. That will enable you to reduce the investment that you're going to need to make. So there's no average time on this. It could be integration touch points. It could be if you're integrated to a billing system, ERP, all those kind of good things. Those things are going to have to be replicated. The other part was the second when we looked at the three things to think about, which was clarity of scope, data migration, and dependencies. That dependencies, number two, is going to be really critical around what the impact is going to be for the time to implement and the cost to implement.
That's fair. Derrick, anything to add to that?
I think Ruskin sums that up well. I mean, it depends, right? Every person that's on the phone probably has a different situation, so it's just really going to depend, on your situation, and as he mentioned, how you manage that first process, that first step to really define your scope and hone in on what's important. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, guys, we are very close to the top of the hour. There is Christian, I do have the rest of your question here. We will get back to you. We'll just send you a direct note on that one because there's a lot to unpack in that one. So we'll send you a direct reach out on that one, just so you know that I didn't ignore the rest of that first question about pros. But he was looking at X-Author, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to unpack with that one. As he looks to move to the platform. So, all right, on that note, Derrick, Ruskin, thank you very much for doing this today. I appreciate it. Everybody that is on the line, thank you very much for coming along and listening to us chat. Please reach out. We would love to come ask. Well, if it's a warm spot, Ruskin would love to come visit you. If it's a cold spot, Derrick would love to come visit you. Either way, we would love to come visit you and talk about your migration strategy and try to help you paint a clear picture. And that's regardless of whether or not you end up choosing Conga. So please reach out. We'd be more than happy to get you to where you need to be. And we look forward to meeting you all again in the future. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Good luck, guys.